All right, everybody, welcome to the AFC Northcast, Week 1 official review of the first week of football. That's right. It's awesome. Well, football is finally here, and Week 1 is in the books. So you can't see right now, but Joey's dancing. He's the only one of us that's dancing right now. Let's get real. But anyways, so Pigskin Pick'em happened this week. It was great. We had someone even join the very last second. So they joined, well, not the last second, I guess, but they joined on Sunday morning. So that means that you can still join too. So we're up to like 15 people, I think, right now. So it's getting fun. Bones dominated this week with 13. Like literally, which ones did he get wrong? It was like dumb ones. But either way, 13 correct on week 1 of football. That's pretty crazy. I would say that's borderline luck, to be honest with you. But
I think he got the Jets wrong.
Yeah.
And he got...
Well, there's the tie, right?
No points for the Detroit game.
Right.
That doesn't count, though. We all got out of 15. So he got 2 that were actually wrong.
He picked... okay.
Right.
He picked the Raiders. Fair enough.
Hold on, I'm bringing it up right now. That's right, we're professionals. We were prepared. Anyways, he got Cleveland wrong, the Jets wrong, and he got the tie, obviously, right? But yeah. So, anyways, feel free to join. Come to the Pigskin Pick'em, get a shout out, and maybe come talk to us. All right, that being said, we're also streaming this right now live on Facebook, on Twitch, and YouTube. So if you want to come be a part of the conversation, be sure to check us out on those platforms. We're doing Tuesdays and Thursdays at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time. That means that on Thursdays, we'll be doing our preview during the Thursday night game, which means that sometimes our divisional teams will be playing. So you'll get live reactions to us while we're doing the actual cast to our own teams. It'll be good stuff. It'll be good fun. So check that out. All right, you guys want to get this kicked off?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right.
We should probably get this over with.
Yeah, I know. So
It's the last time. It's the last time you're gonna see that, people.
That's the raddest shirt, Chad.
Jersey. The Antonio Brown jersey is almost certainly retired at this point. I'm not a jersey burner. I wouldn't do that to the ozone. It's not looking good, boys. It's not looking good.
Hey, you know what? In early 2000, it wasn't looking real good for people with Ray Lewis jerseys. But here we are, almost 2 decades later, and he's basically a television pastor. So,
well, just to catch everybody up, most people probably, by the time they listen to this, will know everything. But I've been supporting AB through basically all of the ludicrous behavior. This weekend, just after our last podcast, he signed with the Patriots. This is unacceptable. Even after 4 days of really soul-searching, I couldn't really find it in my heart to root for his success. I really just wanted him to collapse the entire Patriots locker room into disarray. I can't help it. It's what's in my heart. I don't want to feel this way. I don't, Antonio. I don't want to. But it's actually gotten worse. Literally minutes before we started this podcast, news broke via the New York Times that Antonio Brown will be facing a lawsuit. He is being charged with rape. We have elected before starting recording that we're not going to dive into the guilt or innocence of this. But if you guys want to speculate on what this could do in terms of football to affect his stay on the team, because we don't know the facts and it's just beginning. And then maybe we'll move on to talking about how bad most of our teams played.
Well, the first thing I actually want to get to about Antonio Brown before we get into allegations or the effects of the allegations, because that's really what we're going to talk about. And that's what they are at this point. Allegations, and we're going to talk about the effects of the allegations. But anyways, is Antonio Brown's to move to the Patriots. Apparently, Antonio Brown had hired a social media expert. Had you guys heard about that?
Sure did.
The attempt to basically forcibly be removed from from the Raiders in one form or another? Because something that I kind of forgot, I guess, and didn't really think about is the fact that Antonio Brown had no say in going to the Raiders, right? He was traded to the Raiders, and some say in a negative move by the Steelers, basically saying that, hey, the Raiders is where people's careers go to die. I guess that's what they said on the Tomahawk show, at least. But so they did that to him out of spite. So he, out of spite, basically did everything he could to try to get himself removed from the Raiders, including those videos that he put up with the contracts, conversations and everything. And in like the ultimate, 200 IQ play, got exactly what he wanted by going from the Raiders to the Patriots.
Yeah. So the thing with the whole Oakland thing is AB didn't choose Oakland. He was traded there. Apparently for like a third and a fifth round pick, right? Is that correct, Chad?
Yes.
Yeah, third.
Fact check me there. So apparently the Patriots were willing to offer a first round pick, but the Steelers didn't want to make a deal with the devil and make them stronger. And so in a roundabout way, and there's all kinds of collusion discussions and things like that, the Patriots got their man eventually. So I don't know. It maybe AB is just a genius, evil mastermind.
Right.
It's and like all of this from the very beginning was a show. From the feet to the helmet, everything was absurd. Every single step of the way, we were like, "This is crazy. Is this really happening?"
It almost makes me wonder if they checked the social media experts' checks and see if they're signed by like Robert Kraft. I'd be willing to see if he bottom lined those or not. But it sounds more like a Patriots 200 IQ play than an Antonio Brown one. I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm not giving him enough credit, but the blonde mustache is not giving him a whole lot to work with.
Nothing makes me happier than a Patriots cheating conspiracy theory. So I will be rooting for evidence to come out every step of the way.
Right.
It's hard for me to believe this was planned from the get-go. I think Antonio knew maybe that the Patriots wanted him. And I think maybe as things developed with the Raiders, maybe it became a possibility in the late stages to realize it. Not necessarily like a whole long weaving plot. I think it's more likely that in the last week or few days, he got together with his agent after they took away the guaranteed money, and it was like, oh, we could really get out of here, and don't worry, you'll get signed and you'll probably win the Super Bowl. He's like, great, I can say one more ridiculous thing. But I don't know. It's certainly, we'll talk a little bit about the Patriots in a while, but you got to figure that the way they looked this week plus him would be a problem for the rest of the NFL.
Right. And I also just wanted to point out so eloquently and humbly how I had a fill in the blank about who would play fewer games this season between Marquise Brown and Antonio Brown, and you guys laughed at me saying it was a stupid question. And it looks like it might not be a stupid question after all, guys. I'm just saying. Maybe I predicted this and, made it happen. So
if you
I willed it into existence.
Well, yeah, let's jump into predictions then.
I don't think you would have predicted this, Justin. The only thing that's keeping Antonio from playing basically the whole season is that he was accused of rape.
Well, no, game one he didn't play.
He didn't play, but that's still 15 games. Marquise could easily miss one game. I think like a substantial win on this bet is it wasn't easy to predict. You asked a good question that we all answered incorrectly, if I remember right.
Well, you all answered it by saying they're not going to miss any games. So I'm just saying. Anyways.
Yes. Didn't see this one coming. I will admit that.
All right.
I will admit it. I would say, man, I've been trying to think of this dude's name. Joey, you'll know right off the top of your head. The tight end that the Patriots had that ended up going to prison and unfortunately
Aaron Hernandez.
suicide. Yes. Yeah. So if I remember correctly, when this stuff first started with him, because this is probably the most parallel example we'll have, they did not cut him right away. So there is a possibility that just the accusation and the lawsuit coming up will not lead to an immediate action from the Patriots. So anyone expecting them to cut him immediately, it's possible, but it's not the obvious answer to this based on their history.
There's another federal investigation targeting an employee at Foxborough, Patrick Chung.
Yeah, and I meant to ask about that. What the heck
he was out there on Sunday night. He's facing like hella federal cocaine charges. He's out there against the Steelers on Sunday, so
whatever.
So there you go. I think that it's reasonable to expect that Antonio may be on the Patriots despite this new news, at least for a time. So do we all kind of agree? It's pretty plausible that he'll be on the team and maybe even play some games here before anything really gets resolved.
I wouldn't be surprised.
I think he'll play this week.
Well, that's the big story. My favorite player of the last bunch of years went to my worst nemesis and then possibly committed a heinous act of crime. So it's really been a great week for football here.
Right. Man.
And that's all before my team played.
Yeah, right.
Oh, man. Any other news? We should move on.
Yeah. Let's get rolling with the actual games themselves. So
let's talk about happier things.
Yeah.
You're last.
Yeah, I'll kick it off with the Browns, and Joey and Chad can attest to the misery that I was feeling this weekend over this loss to the Titans. So 43-13, the Browns lost. You guys probably already know the panic that everybody's hitting. Brown social media was my best friend because all they did was wave goodbye to all the bandwagon fans that were like, "Fuck this, I'm not hanging out here." And all I gotta say is bye, Felicia. So, but I will say there's light at the end of the tunnel. So before I get into the bad parts of the game, I want to talk a little bit about the good. The first is Baker Mayfield as a whole, right? So he did have 3 interceptions. All 3 of them were at the very end of the game, right? In high pressure situations, which isn't necessarily, I mean, it's obviously not a good thing, right? But for 3/4 of the game, Baker Mayfield actually played pretty good football, right? He was 25 for 38, 65% completion, 285 yards, and a touchdown. Pretty good. Pretty damn good. Especially after getting sacked 5 times. Right, and there was a lot more contact other than just that weren't recorded as sacks. So that'll kind of move us over into the offensive line and talk about the play of the offensive line. So, yeah, as a whole, it was really weird because everyone was so worried and stressed out about the left tackle position. But from what I was watching, it looked like the right side was collapsing significantly more often. Right, then the left tackle, the starting left tackle, got ejected from the game for like donkey kicking one of the Titans in the head, right? So Greg Robinson basically, which we'll get to the penalties. Oh,
I can't wait to hear your theory on this.
But
no, I want you to talk about this kick right now.
No, I'm going to talk about this kick right now. No, I don't think he should have been ejected from the game.
I knew it.
But we'll talk about it. I think there is more evidence for Myles Garrett getting ejected from the game than there is from Greg Robinson getting ejected from the game, right? So, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, Myles Garrett, so again, after the play was over, right, still getting pushed and shoved and like fucked around with by the Titans, and then he goes and basically pushes back at dude in his face. And the only reason I guess Myles Garrett wasn't ejected from the game is because it was open hand and not closed hand. And it was more of like a push, and they were like, well, maybe it was a move. Anyways, so Greg Robinson, the play was over, and he got pushed over the pile and ended up like on his back and like kicked with his feet, right? So,
dude, he wound up and kicked him in the face with the cleats, with the spikes.
So you're telling me that he was like aiming this fucking like 350-pound man that was on his back like a turtle was just aiming like, dude, I'm going to get this dude in the face.
Yes. That's
And
exactly
after
what
he
I'm
was
saying.
pushed, after the clock, or after the play was called dead, he was pushed over somebody else. And in the process of it, like, it would happen, if you watch it live, it happened extremely quick. It's only when things are slowed down to, like, 1/20th of a second that it's like, oh, yeah, he definitely, you could see him, like, targeting, aiming, and he donkey kicked him in the face.
My first reaction to this play was he will be ejected. He kicked a man in the face, and the fact that he didn't get ejected right away blew my mind. And then the refs finally stopped the game to
New
look
York
at it.
did, but...
And I was like, dude. And then they played it in slow motion, which obviously makes it look worse. But it's like, dude, he drew his knee back and he thrust one foot directly into his face. He kicked him in the face. Like, you're not allowed to do that even when you're 8 years old. Like, he deserved to get ejected.
So first off, he kicked with both feet.
This is the front car of the excuse train.
Yeah.
Let's not act like Greg Robinson is a game-changing left tackle.
Right.
He was cut by the Browns, and no one in the league wanted him, and that's how he ended up back on the Browns.
No, it's a big deal, Joey, because he gets ejected, and then their backup gets hurt, and they only had 5 offensive linemen after
suited up for that day.
I think we all agree that their first 5 suck. So their 2 through 7 are terrible. That's a big deal, aside from the penalties. So actually, when he did that, that's, to me, that was the first
when
big
the wheels
sign
fell
they
off.
were in big trouble.
Well,
like,
and a lot of the
line is
penalties were things like false starts, right, on the offensive line. But anyways,
Never him though.
But anyways,
never that number. Yeah.
What was I gonna say? Also, yeah, he drew both of his feet, and you make it sound like he, like, brought his knee to his chest and just boom, pummeled him.
Our listeners can look it up for themselves. But he kicked him in the face.
Watch it in real time. And I'm not saying that he did not kick the guy in the face, right? But I'm also saying that. So let's get into some of the penalties. Like, a lot of the penalties, they were like boom, boom things that happened that 9 times out of 10 would have just been overlooked or wouldn't have been called because they weren't actually viable penalties. Now, most of them, in my opinion, were pretty early on. Like, there was, who was it? Was it Demarius Randall? Yeah, it was Demarius Randall with that holding call, if you know what I'm talking about, where they called him. That was fucking ridiculous. There was the blindside block that was earlier from one of the offensive linemen. Roughing the passer that happened like twice early on in the game. That was just ridiculous. And again, I'm not going to say that the ones towards the end of the game weren't warranted as things started to get sloppy and out of hand. But some of those at the beginning of the game were fucking atrocious.
Let's talk about football things that happened.
All right.
No, for real. So
no.
So it was a close game, right?
Okay.
So the Browns pull within 3, right? It was at 16-13?
I think
15-13, right?
Because of the
everybody's
safety.
Dancing again. Shit's going good. The next play from scrimmage. Justin, do you remember what it was?
Yeah, it was with Henry where he ran all the way 75 yards on like a screen pass. Which, by the way, if you watch that, Christian Kirksey got face masked on that so hard and he got his head completely turned and tackled to the ground. And I know that you're like wiping your head like, oh, this is ridiculous, right? But first off, 18 penalties for 182 yards is nothing to shake a stick at, right? Like, that's something that's significant to talk about. Would you disagree?
So the Browns were penalized unjustly more than the Titans because the NFL has a vendetta against the Browns?
Because of it all comes back to Bottlegate, bud. No, I'm just kidding. No, but but to say that they're insignificant is overlooking the bigger picture.
No, they're obviously not insignificant. They had almost 200 yards in penalties. Like,
right. So you don't want to talk about 18 penalties for 182 yards.
But you don't lose by 30 points because of penalties.
Right, but 30 points wasn't until like the end of the fourth quarter when everything was done. Like, everything was kind of done and everyone just was like, well, fuck it. And that goes with discipline, which we can talk about discipline if you want to talk about discipline. But it was like 15-13 all the way up to the beginning of the fourth quarter. or whenever
So
that was the third. It was towards the end of the third when that run was the 75-yard run.
what do you think it was then, Justin, that happened in the fourth quarter that really let the game get away? If you let's redirect, because it'll be very tempting for Joey and I to keep making fun of you about conspiracy theories. So what do you think
Well,
happened in the fourth quarter?
so anyways, the big thing that pulled the lead away was that 75-yard touchdown for the Titans. And then after that, just the interceptions by Baker Mayfield. That's really kind of what pulled it away. But anyways, sorry.
Sorry, go.
I was going to say what I did want to point out though is that watching the game for a second time made me significantly less worried about the Browns as a whole. So as I was getting to before, the right tackle position is what towards the right side of the offensive line is what worried me the most as far as like what I saw in actual play. And everyone's all talking about left tackle. What are they going to do at left tackle? What are they going to do at left tackle? And left tackle, the left side looked completely fine. And then as they started to like rotate people over from the right side over to the left side to take over for Greg Robinson and Lamb, I don't remember his first name is, like Kendall Lamb, I think, because he got hurt, which by the way, he's probably going to continue to miss games. The right side got even worse, which just put Baker under a bunch of pressure. Baker was holding on to the ball way too long on a lot of different plays because he kept trying to extend it way farther than he needed to when there was guys up short that he could have just made the play and go on. Again, to go back to the penalties, right? The penalties just happen to happen like at the perfectly wrong time, if that makes sense. So it's like 1st and 10, 15-yard penalty, 1st and 25, and that's like for anybody, that's difficult to make up, right? Or the Titans are 1st and 12 because he just, Mariota just got sacked or something, and then 2 penalties, 3 penalties later, they're like in the red zone, right? So they just all perfectly happen at the right time, in my opinion. I don't know, but
they did. When there's 18 of them,
right?
The odds are pretty high that they're gonna, stack up. I do have to just make one more penalties joke.
Okay.
Because Freddie Kitchens always, it's one of his big lines. We don't practice penalties. So honestly, I just want to congratulate the Browns because they did it so naturally without having practiced it all in the preseason.
Right.
That I really just am really impressed. Okay, I'm done.
All right, cool.
Sorry, I've been waiting all week for that.
Nice. You like saved that one up?
Yeah.
So outside of penalties, what do you think the Browns did to lose?
I think it was Baker Mayfield trying to. Well, let's. I think deep into the Browns, it was a culture thing, of the idea of. I think there was a lot of hype and not a lot of. I think they were resting on their laurels like way too soon. I don't know. There was a lot of things that happened. Like, so they started Greedy Williams over Terrence Mitchell, who is like unquestionably better than Greedy Williams, right? I don't think there's much of a point to that, other than for them to say, hey, we're probably going to be fine this game. Let's Greedy some experience at starting. Like, I just can't. That's the only logical conclusion I can think of to start Greedy, especially when during the preseason. I don't know about you guys, but when I saw him during the preseason, I was significantly less than impressed by what we saw from him. So, like, why would you do that? I don't know. And yeah, there was a lot of like big plays that Baker kept trying to make, taking him to the house when he could have just taken a couple yards up the middle and chopping them up here and there. And it just didn't seem like he needed to. I don't know. What's up?
I'm going to blame the fans.
Yeah.
I heard, unless Justin, if you can tell me a different thing that the fans do that would sound like this, but at halftime, the Browns were down 12-6, and I heard booing. I heard it.
Mm-hmm.
I heard it in the stadium when the game went to halftime. I was watching it live, and I made a note of it because I was like, dude, this is a good team. This is a team that can score 20 points in a quarter. You're down 12-6. Give your team a break. And you know what? I think Mayfield is a professional athlete, and I think that he can handle the pressure. But if you're getting booed at halftime and you see the game start to slip, you're going to push a little more than normal. And I think that the fans got in his head. I think they got in his head, and I think he pushed it, and I think that's why he played so bad, because he had a good first 3 quarters. He was doing fine.
Right.
He was throwing the ball to whoever was open. He was playing a relatively conservative game, but the Browns were totally in it. Like, even with no offensive line to speak of, like, and I'm not blaming you. You
Mhm.
weren't there. But these guys, like, have a little faith. You got a good team. Let them work their way through it. Booing at halftime down 12-6. Jesus Christ.
And that first drive was
Beautiful.
like the first drive was everything everybody in Cleveland has been waiting for all off.
Right.
Spread the ball around. You had jet sweeps to Jarvis, and Chubb was going, and Higgins had a nice catch. OBJ, everyone had a catch except for Njoku.
I know.
Hilliard scored a touchdown, so like
Yeah.
you showed the diversity in the backfield. Like everything came together on that first drive. Yeah, I think especially late in the game, Baker was holding on too long to try to be the hero.
Right.
I mean, once the ball gets rolling, so I turned the Ravens game off at the end of the third quarter of the Ravens. And the first play from scrimmage that I saw when I went to the Browns game was the pick that basically broke their back.
Right.
The pick to Bayard, they were already down 22-13.
Right.
It was like, oh, this is how this game is go.
Right.
It was like quadruple coverage. It was a bad pick.
So if you look at that from because they showed it on, because I looked at it too from like the typical game cam that you see, and I was like, yeah, that was like quadruple coverage. That was bad. But then they showed it again from like sky cam, or kind of behind Baker, and really he had plenty of room to adjust that ball like just to the left to get Odell Beckham to reach it. And if you look at it, if he would have thrown it just like a foot or two to the left, it would have been a beautiful pass and a completion that was like totally within the capabilities of most NFL quarterbacks to make. But he just threw it a little bit too far to the right, and that's what led to the pick. So as far as I guess what I'm trying to defend is the decision making on that throw is what I'm trying to defend.
That's fair. Yeah.
Versus the accuracy.
No, I still think that Baker Mayfield is a stellar quarterback. Nobody in Cleveland should be paying one loss.
Seriously. He's fine.
Just chill out, everyone. Yeah.
Right.
I think we've talked a little bit about how the Browns suck this game, so I just would like to wrap it up with a little Delaney Walker quote into a question for you, Justin. After the game, Delaney Walker quoted a hero, I'm sure, of all of ours, ex-Cardinals coach Dennis Green, and he said, "They are who we thought they were." Justin, who are the Browns after week 1?
Man, they better be hungry is what they better be. I know that doesn't necessarily answer a who, but that's all I can think of. And that's like, I think that you're coming out of something like this where you're holding your head so high when you go into it, and then you come out of it just looking like a complete asshole because everybody, it's like, it's almost like they were just, like I kind of alluded to earlier, just significantly overconfident. I mean, there was plenty of times where Delaney Walker like wasn't covered. It's like, how do you not cover someone who's one of the best targets on the Texans? So I think coming
even the
out,
Titans.
I'm sorry, even the Titans. I think coming out of this, the Browns better be fucking like, damn, we fucked up, and ready to be aggressive and play well. Yeah, I still think that they're going to go 12-4, if that answers your question.
Good.
I think the hunger point is a fair point. If anybody's familiar with the best movie franchise ever in the history of everything, the Rocky movies, the story of Rocky 3 is Rocky's been crowned the champ, and he loses the eye of the tiger. The Titans have been listening, knowing their week 1 opponent is Cleveland, all offseason, that everybody talk about Cleveland. And the Browns are on all the matches. Browns are on all the preview shows, this and that. And I think maybe they just read their press clippings a little too much. For a team, none of them have played together in real game action preseason. OBJ's out here wearing watches that cost house, shit like that. So, yeah, maybe a little humble pie is what they needed, and they'll get their shit from.
Right. Also, Greg Joseph is online too, waiting to get his job
Yeah.
back. But
Dude,
That was the first sign.
I wanted
I
to
know.
make fun of that so bad, but then so many other things happened in this game.
I know. I saw that, and I was just like, "Fuck, here we are again." No, but overall, like I said, if you go back and watch, obviously it's hard to say, with the exception of 182 yards and penalties. The first 3 quarters, the offense surprisingly played pretty good. Better than I would say that I've seen the Browns offense play in a while. I think is worth saying. So
Alright.
I watching it a second time was less worried than I was walking away from it on Sunday. So, but yeah,
Well, you're rattled, but I like that you're keeping the faith. That's what you got to do. You're a winner now, Justin, and winners don't get rattled by one bad game. So
Browns
welcome
fan.
to the club. I'm glad to see you. Glad to see you healthy and happy like this and confident. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the Bengals, Joey? Tell us about the Bengals. That one of the teams that didn't totally shit the bed this week.
Yeah. The Bengals had a potentially expectation shifting football game in the Great Northwest, Seattle. Notably, probably the hardest stadium to play in the league, at least in recent history. I know Arrowhead's up there. People don't like the mystique of Foxborough. But going to Seattle and performing has proven very challenging for a lot of teams. Not to mention that they're headed up there without AJ Green. So the story of this game to me was the Bengals defense. They held the Seahawks to 233 total yards. A team that's been very, very committed to the rush held them to like 70 something rush yards. The rookie wide receiver for the Seahawks, DK Metcalf, kind of went off. It's almost uncanny that the Bengals took a lead into the fourth quarter, and almost as soon as the fourth quarter started, Russell Wilson was doing what I always say that Russell Wilson does in the fourth quarter of football games and just bombing it over everybody's head. They had that like 50-yard touchdown pass to Lockett like in the first minute of the fourth quarter. But all things considered, they did pretty well. They kind of abandoned the run game. I don't think that that's something that's going to be sustainable for them. But the biggest story of the game to me is this was kind of the John Ross game.
yeah, I just wrote that down.
And not to say that he showed anything that he hadn't shown before, other than there was a lot more volume of it because he didn't get hurt on like the first catch.
He didn't
So
pull his groin
we
on
got
the
to see
first touchdown.
multiple John Ross things. He had 2 touchdown catches, both of which were precluded. I don't even know if that's the proper word, but I like to try to sound smart.
Sure.
By
Yeah.
a big John Ross drop. So we got the full spectrum of what it's like to have John Ross on your team. Everybody else besides John Ross. So John Ross was their home run hitter in this game. And everybody else, Tyler Boyd included, basically possession receivers. Eifert had like 5 catches for 5 yards a catch. Boyd had like 8 catches for 8 yards a catch. Uzama got involved. So I think all in all, for a rookie head coach, they did some really interesting things schematically, especially with Ross. Having that speed of Ross is something they've really been missing. And we saw in other games in the division again that skill aside, speed kill. Even if you get lucky, which every time John Ross catches the ball, maybe it's just luck.
Well, that second touchdown was very lucky.
Pretty lucky. It was double coverage. Yeah.
Free safety just jumped way too early.
Right.
Hilarious, actually. But hey, man, he caught it and he finished the play.
Yeah. And even without a pretty quiet game from Geno Atkins,
Dude, he killed it though. Like it.
yeah,
I was
even when
listening to some Bengals.
statistically, yeah,
Yeah.
Sam Hubbard, statistics galore. I think he led the team in tackles. He had 2 sacks. Dunlap was everywhere,
Yes.
everywhere. So, I mean, entering the fourth quarter, they showed a graphic. Seattle's average yards to go on third down entering the fourth quarter was 12.8. And that's why they were winning the football game in Seattle. They probably got a little pass happy. They ended up with a chance to drive down the field, down 21-20, with under a minute left. And in my opinion, got hosed on a call where Andy Dalton got hit in the pocket, in and around his arm. Looked to me like he had control of the football still when he went forward with his hand. They ruled it a fumble on the field as time expired and reviewed it and upheld it. And I don't know if the refs just wanted to go home and have dinner, but it seemed pretty egregious, especially for a team that only needed to get in field goal range to win that game.
It was a terrible call.
Yeah, it was off. Which brings me to my last point. Randy Bullock missed a field goal earlier in the game. And if he makes that field goal, despite the butterfly effect and all that other stuff,
right,
it's a 23-14 game on Seattle's last offensive drive, and then they're forced to kick an onside kick to play that whole game.
Right.
So special teams, we say it over and over again. The good teams, the successful teams, don't fuck up on special.
That's true.
Especially once you get late in the season, that shit makes you pay the price.
Right.
I wanted to make a bigger deal about that fumble because it was such a bad call in my opinion, and then they reviewed it and somehow didn't get it. There would have been like 9 seconds on the clock. They were on the wrong side of the 50. I don't think it changed the outcome of the game, but I think as professionals, the refs should have done it correctly. I think it's like embarrassing. The ball was even spinning. Like, I mean, he threw it.
It seemed very, very obvious.
It was definitely terrible. The one thing that I would add, we all play the Seahawks this year, right? All of our teams.
We do.
Bobby Wagner is a seriously amazing football player.
Yeah.
He tackled Joe Mixon many times. And did you ever notice that when they collided, Joe Mixon fell backwards like hard every time? Like he would, every time they would collide, Bobby Wagner would stop him in his tracks. Now him kind of rolling up on his ankle, you know, seems like an accident or whatever. But I was so impressed. Like, you can be a very strong person, and when someone runs into you full speed, like, you know, they fall forward a little bit. And that is just not what was happening. Any of our teams that want to run the ball need to make sure that there is a offensive lineman finding him and getting in his way or throwing grass in his face or doing anything to just stop him from mowing down our running backs, because Joe Mixon is good and he was getting stonewalled at point of contact. It was crazy.
There's
say
potential for some catastrophic collisions with one Roosevelt Nix and Patrick Ricard and some of these big boys in the hole with Bobby Wagner.
Yeah, if the Steelers ever learn to put their awesome fullback in the game, that would be possible. The other thing I would say is that the Bengals offensive line looked as potentially spotty as we all suspected. Now I'm talking about Jadeveon Clowney here. So he's a great player, but he's a great player that's been on the team for 4 days. Like, he probably hasn't even opened the playbook yet. And he was all over the place. He was getting wherever he wanted, stopping the run, getting into the passing lanes, and it was a mess. So I would just line up those edges also. Cincinnati, those are the two things I noticed that negative. I don't want to be too negative because they played a pretty good game, and I thought their defensive line was awesome, all over the place, and smart too. They weren't just like running crazy havoc. Like they were reading screens well. They just appeared to be like minding their P's and Q's and just playing really good football. So they should be excited about that. But got to block on the outside of the line big time.
So
Yeah.
so Kyle on Facebook said that Robinson can stop him because he can just kick him. But
Yes.
also, I wanted to point out too, Hector Mendez stopped by, but I didn't have chat open, so I forgot to check. But
Called
anyways,
Aaron Hernandez, AJ Hernandez.
yeah, whatever, same difference. So I wanted to ask you guys as far as the Cincinnati game goes, because you guys pretty much covered everything important, I guess. Also, Clayton Fengelum, I thought, had a good game. You guys didn't really talk about him either. But what was I going to say? Oh, do you think this is more indicative of the potential of Cincinnati without AJ Green? As in, like, this is more surprising to you of the possible success of the Bengals before and even after AJ Green comes back? Or do you think it's indicative of maybe the Seahawks weren't the litmus test that we thought that they were going to be for the division this season?
I think it's more a positive towards Cincinnati than a negative towards Seattle. Seattle, we talked about it. Seattle's one of these teams that every year their record's better than it seems like they are, which is why I think they're kind of like a gatekeeper type of team, where they're kind of a middle of the road team. They don't have any of the dynasty feel like they did 5 years ago.
Yeah, Legion of Boom.
They've kind of fallen apart from that. Bobby Wagner being one of the only. Bobby Wagner and Russell Wilson, basically the only guys left. I think there's still cause for concern on Cincinnati's back end. They let rookie wide receiver just run wild, basically. And Seattle's receiving core is nothing to write home about. So
right.
I think Kirkpatrick didn't have a great game, especially
even though he had that gold grill, he was spouting
with a rookie wide receiver.
Yeah.
So I think there's still cause for concern, but I think that they opened my eyes with how well they performed without AJ Green, and John Ross was a huge part of that. If John Ross can become a legitimate receiver, he doesn't have to be a number one, but if he can become a deep threat guy, which Tyler Boyd is not, I think that could be cooking a little bit.
I don't think much changed for me, honestly. I think that Cincinnati played a little better than I thought they would, but one of the few things I got right in our last podcast was that this game would, on the scoreboard, be pretty close. Seattle really eases their way into games. They don't try to blow teams out, or I'm sure that they try to, but it's just not the way that it works out for them. I thought that Cincinnati kept it a little closer than I thought they would, and having a chance to win. I didn't expect really, but honestly, Seattle plays a slow kind of. They thrive in these close games, and I don't know. I think I had Cincinnati for 6 wins, and I think that's probably around where they're going to fall. They try hard. They're professionals, and they did that last year too. They played hard and they beat some teams, and that'll happen again this year. They're okay. They're fine. They're the worst team in the division.
Well, speaking of close games, Chad, why don't you tell us a little bit about the Patriots and the Steelers?
This game, it was a nail biter. It was a nail biter early. It started out 0-0.
Yeah.
Steelers forced a punt on the first drive. So, this was a game of drama and suspense. It ended 33-3. So, very close. Very
a lot of
competitive.
threes.
At halftime, they were down 20-0, and Mike said, "We need to make routine plays routinely."
Is that another?
After halftime,
I fucking love that so much.
After halftime, they only lost the next half 13-3. So honestly, I think he was right. I think they made some really good halftime adjustments and were able to lose the second half by only 10 points. Oh boy, it's going to be really hard for me to contain this. We lose to the Patriots every time, and it just sucks so much. There's nothing really good that happened. I tried to take my notes based on things that were good and things that were bad for every team, and almost everything I have written down is a joke. I will say that Devin Bush was good. He was all over the run game. He was shedding blocks from the offensive linemen. The Patriots eventually basically tried to move him out by pushing a running back way out wide. And so he would basically line up as a defensive back. And I thought he basically played a pretty mean defensive back for much of the game. So the future is bright. What else could happen? James Washington finally caught a deep ball from Ben. It took 3 tries. And then when he caught it, he ran out of bounds because he was so excited instead of scoring a touchdown. So
that was so curious. That was near the beginning of the game. And they showed the replay a couple times. And I watched it I was like, maybe like he was leaning that way. It didn't really seem like he was, though.
I think he was just so excited that Ben finally didn't overthrow him. I rewatched the game, but only half of it because it was too painful. And I just focused on the lines, the defensive line and the offensive line, because on first watch as a fan, you're following the ball.
Right.
And I was really surprised at basically a lack of results. But I will say that when I rewatched the defensive line and the front seven, I felt like they actually collapsed the pocket fairly quickly. The problem is that Tom Brady reads the Steelers defense like yesterday. Like he never moves past his first read. He already knows where he's going to throw the ball before he snaps it. It's actually almost a little insulting. So that's the reason that they were basically never able to rattle him. There was probably 4 plays in the whole game where Tom Brady went to his second read, and they were all pretty pedestrian throws or bad throws from him. So, I think, Joey, you have to be excited about that. Running a, more complex defense, you could probably make Brady, looking at this game, look a lot worse than the Steelers did. But, yeah, there's a lot of crap, dude. I'm going to let you guys insult my team for a little bit because I will lose focus and rant for a long time. And there's like a lot of complaining I could do, coaching, playing.
Yeah, and one of us has already ranted enough about their team losing, so. But
it was ugly.
What I want to know about is the run game, man. Like, what happened with the run game, man? James Conner didn't take off. Jalen Samuels didn't take off. They tried. Maybe not as much as down by 30, you probably can't, but.
They tried for almost a half.
Yeah. But
I would love to answer that question because that is my coaching rant.
Okay.
Even Chris Collinsworth or whatever knew immediately. The Steelers started doing what they call counter. So they would pitch the ball out wide and then the running back would cut it back across the line of scrimmage. And I only was able to listen to last year's game, but apparently they did this to much success against the Patriots last year. And everyone that knows that when you game plan against the Patriots, what you want to do is the same thing you did the last time you played them. not at all. Are you kidding me? They tried the same stuff against. Oh, it's like, are you kidding? It's Bill Belichick. Mm-hmm. It's the first game of the year. The only tape he has is the last time you played him. That's the only tape. And that's what they were doing. Oh, my God. The exit. A very upsetting situation. So basically that's a big part of the reason the running game was an epic failure is that they basically schemed it the exact same way they did last year. So the Patriots were ready. Surprise. I actually thought that James Conner looked okay. I thought he looked better than his stats ended up indicating. And yeah, they kind of just went away from it because they were down by 3 scores. Because when they finally got down to the 1-yard line, they kicked a field goal to remain down by 3 scores, which clearly means that Mike Tomlin isn't holding the fancy math chart that all the other coaches have.
He just rolled over for Bill Belichick and said, "It's right here, buddy."
People that hate Mike Tomlin will look at that sequence and they will want him fired so hard because they called a timeout on 3rd and 1. And then coming out of the timeout, they threw the least efficient play in the red zone, which is a fade. And they threw it to the receiver who had so far that game dropped 3 passes. So if any of you guys can't remember what happened on that 3rd and 1, Dante Moncrief turned his head over the wrong shoulder and the ball fell harmlessly into the end zone. And then the Steelers kicked a field goal to go down 20-3 and give absolutely no one any hope.
Yeah,
Dante Moncrief had an awful game.
Yeah, he sucked. He sucked hard. It was very not cool. I'm very much looking forward to Deontay Johnson getting his shit together and dispatching Moncrief from our starting lineup.
And he did it all with like the big bling hanging out of his jersey.
He had a dislocated finger in camp. Maybe it still hurts. I don't know. He's in the lineup, so he's got to catch the ball. It's like his job. So
Fact.
I don't care, you know?
Yeah. This game for me was more about the Patriots than the Steelers. It's early in the year. Belichick has had all offseason planned for this. It's almost impossible to beat the Patriots when they have more than a week to prepare for it. So hard. Belichick's just on another level from everyone else. We saw it in the Super Bowl with the Wonder Boy genius Sean McVay. Belichick made him a bitch. But they are so multiple on offense. It's stupid. Guys just keep showing up. It's Edelman. It's Gordon. It's Dorsett. White. Burkhead. Like,
yeah.
They're everywhere. And all their guys can do everything. Everybody does their job. On defense, you don't get guys out of position. Like, when Juju made plays, he just beat Stephon Gilmore one-on-one. And it wasn't even, like, beat badly a lot of times, but he beat him. You know, you're going to get him sometimes. Juju's a good enough receiver that you're going to get him sometimes. It was curious that they didn't bracket Juju the way that everybody kind of expected.
Didn't have to.
Yeah, they just let Stephon Gilmore play him face up. I think it's really underrated how much the Patriots improved on the defense. Michael Bennett is a grown-ass man. That guy is a problem for your run offense. And they got Jamie Collins back in there.
I was about to say, he made some good plays,
he seems
too.
to have moved beyond whatever weird personality differences he had his first time around in New England. The Pats are scary, man.
Yeah, and I'll say 2 kind of final thoughts. I mentioned the D-line. I thought that the O-line looked pretty bad in the first quarter, but I thought they settled in, particularly in pass protection after the first quarter. They gave Ben a pretty good pocket, and if not for excellent coverage, I think they look good, and I think they'll continue to look good. And as a final note of positivity, look, I'm not going to panic that the sun rose this morning. Okay, the Patriots beat the Steelers. I think we all kind of saw it coming, right? It was a little uglier than maybe we hoped. Not the first time that's happened either. I expect the Steelers to look a lot better. They've got a great chance with a home game against Seattle next week that I can't wait to preview. So no panic buttons are getting pushed, but certainly emotionally it was not a satisfying experience for me to watch the game.
Speaking of emotional satisfaction.
Yeah, so after 3 hard losses in the AFC North, all of them, I'd say, relatively equally heartbreaking to their respective home team, we come to the returning division champs, the Baltimore Ravens. Take it away.
Air raid. I'll paint you a picture.
All right.
You're a free agent running back. You get signed by a football team who, in the last half of the season last year, ran the ball at a record pace with efficiency still. That cannot be understated. Record volume, record efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
All right. You line up for your first play from scrimmage on offense, and you have 4 fat asses in front of you. They belong to Marshall Yonda, and they belong to Orlando Brown Jr., and Ronnie Stanley, and Patrick Ricard. And you get a power run to the right, first play from scrimmage, and you bust it for 49 yards. That's how Mark Ingram's day started. And it was just all downhill from there for the Ravens off. So Mark Ingram had a fantastic game. He brings an edge to the team that they didn't have last year. He's a veteran guy. I think his role in this team, other than RB1, which they are going to use a committee. We saw some of Gus Edwards even early before things got really out of hand.
Mm-hmm.
Mark Ingram is the bulldog of this team. I think he is going to be a really, really big part of the identity, the tough identity that they want to cultivate. He was great. The good thing is that they didn't even need Mark Ingram to have a good full game. Much so, the Mark Ingram success, nobody's really surprised about. The surprising things came very early in the first quarter when Hollywood Brown took a slant a la things that we've seen from OBJ in New York, where you're the fastest guy on the field and you take a slant and you beat one guy and it's nothing but green grass and clear skies ahead of you. In the first quarter, Hollywood Brown had 3 catches for 144 yards and 2 touchdowns. His next catch after the 43-yard or whatever touchdown was an 83-yard touchdown. And that's part of the speed kills thing. He hasn't had a lot of opportunity to get chemistry with Lamar as a passer. But if you're 5 yards behind the nearest defender, it doesn't fucking take much.
Right.
I will talk about Lamar a lot more in a second. Along with one Hollywood Brown success, Miles Boykin, who was the preeminent rookie receiver on the team in the preseason at least, got his first touchdown on a really interesting pass that could have been accidental or it could have been a chemistry and communication thing. Lamar was under pressure, and I promise I won't talk about Lamar this whole time. But he evaded the pressure and kind of seemingly threw the ball up for grabs into the end zone. And Boykin kind of continued his route and then faked back to the inside behind the DB, catch it basically wide open. Kind of looked like Lamar threw him open, or maybe they had some communication or chemistry. But otherwise, it was just a lucky pass, which the Ravens certainly didn't need in this game. But it could have been a lucky game for everybody. Along with those touchdown passes, the Lamar Jackson 4th touchdown pass first half went to Mr. Utility himself, Mr. Gap opener for Mark Ingram's big run in the beginning of the game, Patrick Ricard, who it's the stereotypical fullback stat line where they have 1 carry for 1 yard and 1 touchdown. In this game, Patrick Ricard had 1 catch for 1 yard and 1 touchdown. He was present on defense in the rotation, got after Ryan Fitzpatrick a little bit. You could see him trying to chase him down a couple times. But the offense just exploded. The defense was never really challenged. the Dolphins sent away like their two best offensive players a week before the start.
Right.
Earl Thomas had his first interception as a Raven. Jimmy Smith incurred a knee sprain. They're calling it a mild knee sprain. They expect him to miss a couple weeks. So that's not great, but the silver lining of it is that he's not out for the year or anything crazy like that. And the Ravens were able to work through it. It's just the Dolphins. And they play a rookie quarterback next week. So hopefully Jimmy Smith not needed for that game either. All right. Now it's time for me to fawn over Lamar Jackson. For everybody, I know the argument against Lamar Jackson is that this is the Dolphins. They're tanking. They're the worst team in the NFL. But this Ravens team and Lamar Jackson did what good teams are supposed to do against teams they're supposed to beat. In fact, they did above and beyond what they're supposed to do. They fucking dominated the Dolphins in this football game. It was never even close. They made Lamar Jackson look like Joe fucking Montana out. The most important stat line of this game, Lamar had a fantastic QB rating. He only threw 3 incompletion, so more touchdowns than incompletion. He had 3 carries for 6 yards.
Right.
That is a fucking thing of beauty. Granted, the score was out of hand, so he never really had to take those chances. But you could see that he was there was a conscious plan for Lamar to be in the pocket and for Lamar to be a passer first. He was using his talent as pretty much the best athlete on the field anytime he steps on a field to evade. And even when DBs were coming on blitzes, Lamar would take a couple steps to evade, and that elusiveness that he brings is something that no other quarterback in the league can do. He was buying himself time, keeping his eyes downfield, and hitting open guys. Guys were open all over the place, other than Hollywood Brown. Mark Andrews was open a lot. Hayden Hurst had his first catch.
Willie Snead had a touchdown.
Willie Snead made an appearance, had a touchdown. So things were clicking, things were rolling, everything's happy in Ravens land. Lamar Jackson was not the highest rushing total for a quarterback in the AFC North this week. That prestigious honor belongs to one Benjamin Roethlisberger, who had 1 carry for 7 yards.
Dominant run.
Mm-hmm. They're changing the scheme, guys.
My last rebuttal, I have 2. My last rebuttal to the Dolphins being an atrocious team. In 2016, 17, one of those years, 2016, the Browns went 0-16. The most points they surrendered that year was 35 points. And they played both Super Bowl teams, Patriots and the Eagles, those seasons. Those teams scored 29, 33 points. In the Lions 0-16 season, they surrendered a game-high 48 points in a game where they scored 25. So as bad as the Dolphins are, even if they're an 0-16 team, this is still an impressive performance for Ravens offense. Lamar Jackson showed development as a passer, even if he's not the second coming of Dan Marino. He showed that he's developed as a passer. He was not inaccurate, notably on any even short or intermediate passes. He was hitting his open receivers in stride, a la Hollywood Brown. All right. And I think it begs the question whether or not John Harbaugh was okie doking everybody in the offseason by feeding into the Lamar Jackson rushing records talk all offseason. I wouldn't put it past him to use that as as some strategery, and a little bit of rope-a-dope
to make people think.
Not that I think they really needed it against the Dolphins, or even thought they would need it against the Dolphins, because all that's ever good for is one game, as everybody's seen. But
yeah, I promise he's gonna run the ball. He's gonna run.
Oh yeah, in the first game, helps a shitload with that running strategy. Yeah, absolutely he will. Having Marquise Brown on tape like that, something they didn't have last year was a guy that had to be respected deep. And now they do. He's on tape torching professional cornerbacks. So that's awesome. Nothing other than Jimmy Smith, nothing but positives. Tim Williams and Tyus Bowser had pretty good games. McPhee got busy in the backfield a couple times. Onwuasu was everywhere. Chris Board made some tackles for losses. Awesome all-around victory for the Ravens. And I'll turn the floor over to you guys to poop on my parade.
I wanted to highlight my favorite play by Lamar Jackson, which is one of the few runs that he had where he bumped and ran into the who was it? I think it was the tight end or whatever. That actually made me laugh out loud. No, but I was surprised. I think I said this during one of the preseason games as well, by the accuracy that Lamar Jackson had. Even when he was on the run and under pressure, which, I mean, it wasn't, an absurd amount of times, but when he was, he made extremely accurate throws. And that was kind of interesting to me. I'm glad that you decided to defend the whole tanking argument before anyone even had a chance to bring it up.
I mean,
right, because it's all anybody's talking about, right? Yeah. It's the truth.
That's the other side to the look how awesome Lamar was this weekend.
Right. I don't want to get too deep into the Dolphins, but it's funny because I don't think the Dolphins are the only team that saw what the Browns did as far as the whole Moneyball idea, which is really what the Browns did, except the football equivalent of it. And other teams are like, oh, hey, maybe we can do this too. But I think the Browns have the advantage of John Dorsey as their general manager. And I think other teams are going to try to replicate what the Browns are doing, or at least did, and are not going to be as successful. That's just my take with that real quick. Maybe we can talk about that some other time. But yeah, all in all, the Ravens were...
You're supposed to be talking about the Ravens.
What's that?
You're supposed to be talking about the Ravens.
That's true. I just can't get over it. The Browns.
Man, the Browns front office is so fucking good.
I know. No, well, I was talking about the Dolphins is what I was talking about, is how they're not going to do that.
Without Dorsey, they would have lost by 45 this week.
Listen, here, at least my team that lost by 30 put up a fucking touchdown this week, all right? At least they saw the end zone. Anyways, so, yeah, I lost my train of thought. Super accurate. I was kind of surprised by that. It's the Dolphins. They weren't solely responsible for the success of the Ravens, but watching some of those corners, they definitely helped in one way or another.
Xavier Howard is supposed to be
so is Minka Fitzpatrick. He's supposed to be pretty good too. But
the secondary, Bryce McCain is back there. The secondary is supposed to be the strength of this really shitty Dolphins defense.
It's hard to tell because of the limited camera perspective that we get when we're watching the games, but it really looked like even the safeties were playing way too short. And it's probably because of that expectation, like you were saying, that Lamar Jackson was just going to keep running it. Or that they were going to keep pounding it with Mark Ingram or whatever it was. Right, exactly. There's no tape on him. So it looked like they were playing short a lot. And I'm not going to say that's the only reason why he beat them. That's absurd, right? But I think that led to a lot of not only his success, but everyone else's success as well. So I'll be interested to see that. That being said, I think that this is the perfect schedule for Lamar Jackson, is to start off with, this incredibly confident building game with against the Dolphins, where he's like, okay, well, maybe I can sit in the pocket, make some decisions and make some throws, then go to the Cardinals, which I think, not to get
Cardinals
too deep.
Come to Baltimore.
I'm sorry, they go to play the Cardinals, whatever. Anyways, and also I think not to call the game too early, but I think most of us are on the page that the Ravens will probably are probably a better team than the Cardinals, right? Even after the comeback that Kyler Murray had, right? So this is going to be a good confidence builder for Lamar Jackson early in the season when he's got a tough road ahead of him with some of the teams. With the Chiefs are going to be a game 3
at Arrowhead
right?
Stadium, week 3.
Yeah, so I think that this is the way the schedule worked out is really important to him. Is I guess what I wanted to put out there.
Yeah, I watched half of the Ravens game in condensed version. So I watched 25 solid minutes of Ravens football this afternoon. Seemed like enough. From what I understand, Lamar didn't even play the whole game.
No.
But I think I learned some things from those minutes the first half when it was competitive before anybody had quit and actually was texting their agent asking for a trade when everybody was still trying. That's the football I was focused on. I think that we now know that Earl Thomas doesn't need to practice. He didn't practice at all last year, and he forced like 9 fumbles and had a bunch of interceptions. And he didn't practice and do any training this year. I mean, he practiced, but he didn't do the preseason, and he just intercepted the ball again right away. So he's really good. Guess we know that now. Probably already knew it. I really studied Lamar. That was my big thing. I love to shit on Lamar. That's my role here. I thought he had a really good game, beyond the statistics. He passed the eye test. Particularly, I think that the only moderately challenging throws he was asked to make were the touchdown passes. So those were the ones that I noted. I thought the first one was the best one. It was a crossing route that he hit his rookie, Hollywood. I think he's earned the name possibly at this point.
Especially with Higgins being out.
Yeah, he hit him right in stride. He really gave him the chance to break that first tackle and to score the touchdown. I thought it was a really nice throw. It doesn't look like a fancy throw, but to not leave that ball behind or anything, like that's what makes that from just a first down into a touchdown. The 2 deep touchdowns, one of which was again to Hollywood, and I think the third one was to Willie Snead, if I remember correctly. There was no one anywhere near him, so he did what I would say was competent work. He threw the ball to a guy that he basically did what he did in college. So I'm glad he did it. He's certainly shown that he won't always hit those guys sometimes, and he did it consistently every time he had the chance this game. His 4th touchdown pass, and I might have mixed this up because Joey said Ricard was the 4th one, but I didn't actually see the Ricard one, so I think he had 5, and the 4th one was the one to some Boykin. And
that's
as
correct.
a Steeler fan, I'm hoping that he tries that every week because I think he did what he did on purpose, and what I saw him do was run backwards 20 yards and while backpedaling, throw the ball to an open spot in the end zone, hoping that his receiver would see that spot because he lofted it. Like, he did not throw a laser. It was a lofting touch pass into the end zone in a packed defensive area. And it worked out. Boykin made a sweet move to get his player going the wrong direction, and it looked real easy. But if I'm the Steelers, I love the idea of Lamar Jackson backpedaling 20 yards and then throwing off his back foot into the end zone when you're starting at the 3-yard line. Like, that could be anybody's ball. So I hope he does that every game. That's what I'm hoping for. But I will say that I do think he did it on purpose. And in that case, I think it actually was a really nice play. But it's a really nice play that I don't think will work consistently in the NFL. I think that I was really impressed with Baltimore, and they do this every year, but in week 1, it's good to see if you're a fan. They really read out the screens, wide receiver and running back alike. Baltimore, I mean, they always do this, but they were just sniffing out every screen. It was either 1-yard gain, 4-yard loss, like every time. So I was pretty impressed with that, and I was actually really impressed with their pass protection. Every time Lamar was throwing that deep ball, it looked like he had all day. He was planting. He had great mechanics for him. He You know, it was just easy. Everything was so nice about it. He was very relaxed in a nice, beauteous pocket. So good props to the offensive line. What I will say is this, and I think this is going to surprise you, Joey. The weakness, if you could say there was one, is that I thought that the Miami receivers were able to get open in the kind of intermediate and deep areas of the field, which really surprised me. And Fitzpatrick's fine quarterback, but he was able to find people. And then the next thing that I noted, and I guess he was throwing away from Earl Thomas, but I wasn't seeing any safety get there very quickly. So a lot of times when a receiver got open, there wasn't a safety closing as quickly as I kind of was going to expect out of Baltimore. So I'm going to be interested to see how those defensive backs play. You know, it looked to me like you could get open in the deep, kind of not those screen routes, but you know, from 7 yards on, like there was field to be had, which surprised me a little bit.
Yeah, it seemed like that's the only thing they did on offense with success. But it's like every time when Fitzpatrick was in the game, it's like every time he turned around, he was airing the ball.
Yeah, and people were getting open just more than I kind of expected. So that gives me hope, since obviously it appears that my team's receivers aren't great. If Miami's receivers can get open, maybe mine can too. You know, like maybe there's hope for me yet. But yeah, obviously overall, you know, the Ravens had the best week. They're leading the division, and there's not a lot not to like, if that sentence makes any sense.
I will inform everybody that career highs in catches and yards for Rashard Higgins came in the same game, 7 catches for 95 yards. And the most touchdowns he's had in a game was 1. So Marquise Brown, in his first quarter of professional football, smashed 2 of Rashard Higgins' career high game totals. That would be yards and touchdowns. Hollywood Brown, remember the name. Also, just one last note on the Ravens' organizational superiority. Don't be confused. This is a rebuild for the Ravens, in case you were wondering. 22 of the 53 rostered players are in their first or second years of professional football. And we just shipped off our franchise quarterback. Some people take 20 years to rebuild.
Yeah.
Cleveland. And some people just do it on the fly and then hang 59 in a notably difficult place to play in week 1 when it's hot as shit outside.
Joey, what is a rebuild? As a Steeler fan, I don't think I've actually ever heard that term before.
You're about to become pretty familiar with it.
Yeah, I was about to say. Yeah, actually, I forgot to ask you.
I made the joke now.
I meant to ask you before, so I'll ask you now. But what do you think it means as far as Josh Dobbs getting shipped off to Jacksonville for Mason Rudolph, and then also for the future of the quarterback position? Because, you know, Ben Roethlisberger has always been this on, or not always, but the last couple of years been this on the fence guy. So, you know, how many more years in the tank does he have? And have they decided, is Mason Rudolph going to be taking over? I don't understand what they're trying to do.
I'll tell you what they're trying to do. Get free money. They had 3 quarterbacks on the roster, and they traded their third for a 5th round pick. So that's called highway robbery. They used and honestly, so the guy that they signed from the practice squad to be their new third quarterback, his name's Devlin Hodges. I didn't talk a lot about him because our preseason podcasts were running 2 hours long as it was, and he probably wasn't going to make the team. But Devlin Hodges statistically had like the best preseason of any Steelers quarterback since the people that I follow at Steelers Depot have been tracking it. He had like a 70% completion percentage. He averaged 10 yards a pass. He was way ahead of anyone, including Ben Roethlisberger, by any metric, to the point where, as the fourth quarterback on the roster, he was playing significant minutes in the preseason game. So basically, I think they believe in Devlin Hodges, and this
All
is
right.
probably exactly what they wanted when they kept Dobbs in the first place. Honestly,
He's
the only
he's basically a preseason second half Hall of Famer.
Yeah. The only negative is a guy that I was very excited about, Tuzar Skipper, had to be dropped from the roster, and he was claimed off waivers by those stinky Giants. So
Those rascals.
Yeah.
he wasn't able to make it back to the Steelers practice squad, so that's a sad story because he was a preseason darling, and now that I watch preseason football, I care about those. But
He'll
yeah,
probably lead the Giants in tackles this year.
Next to Jabril Peppers.
Dude, he's got some pass rushing acumen, but honestly, I would say in terms of the project, of the future, Roethlisberger is signed for the next 3 years. Mason Rudolph is also signed for the next 3 years, so they can basically feel that all out. And I would say that you should assume they will draft another quarterback in 2 years. High. Third round or above.
Entering Ben's contract year. That's the time.
Right.
Yeah. They've kind of been doing it whenever they see value. I mean, they drafted fourth round a few years ago, then they Mason with their extra third round pick, and Ben actually went on the media and got all riled about that, saying they should have drafted somebody that could help the team. Pretty great welcome, right? Very classy. So we'll see. I think that the Steelers, like hopefully most teams, or most good ones at least, scout all the quarterbacks every year, no matter what their position is, because you always want to be seeing the results of your scouting, right? And so they'll be prepared, and they'll grab someone of value starting next year if they feel like they can, because Ben could retire at any time.
All right. So Devlin Hodges, keys to the kingdom. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, he's awesome. Hall of Fame jacket.
Right. Exactly.
Did it.
So hold on one second. Let's wrap it up by talking about the player of the week. So we talked a little bit about during the preseason about naming an offensive and defensive player of the week across the AFC North. So let's get into it. Who do you guys think is going to be, or who will you name as the offensive player of the week this week?
As the Ravens representative on this podcast, I'd like to nominate Lamar Jackson. 17 of 20, 324 yards and 5 touchdowns as the AFC North offensive player of the week. And I really hope everybody didn't think I was actually going to let the podcast end without me talking about Lamar's passing stat line.
I don't know, man. Andy Dalton threw for 418 yards. So.
And how many touchdowns?
Look, man, you were talking about his yards, so that's what I was talking about.
What was his completion percentage?
Don't worry about it, man. He threw more than 20 fucking footballs. That's what it was. No, but anyways.
Sounds like inefficiency to me.
Right. I would agree with you. I actually, as we were talking about it during the podcast, I thought about, well, maybe John Ross, man, because he just, overwhelmingly surprised me by the fact of those 2 big touchdowns that he had. But I think that I was a victim of basically being so down on him for the last 2 seasons that this season on game 1, I was like, oh, damn. That could be fucking dangerous. Tyler Boyd, John Ross, whatever. But no, I mean, it's basically I was searching for an excuse not to pick Lamar Jackson. That's really what it was. When you're going on to John Ross as your next best, it's a pretty steep hill.
I think that John Ross deserved mention in this sort of dialogue.
Fair.
I think that Hollywood Brown deserved mention in this conversation, but I think Lamar ran away with the inaugural Week 1 award for Offensive Player of the Week in the AFC North.
Does that mean that the award's named after him from here on out?
No.
It doesn't. It's not like the
Lamar Jackson AFC North Offensive Player of the Week.
Named after, if we do a season MVP, we may consider naming the award after that player.
All right, let's talk about defensive player of the week. What you guys got?
I'll nominate first. I think that I would like to nominate one Samuel Hubbard of the Cincinnati Bengals. He registered, these statistics are not important if they're wrong, but roughly 11 tackles, 2 sacks, and a couple more QB pressures. And he's also just running around like a wildebeest out there. He's great. You got to watch the Cincinnati Bengals' entire defensive line. He's the one that racked up the numbers, so he's the one that I'm arbitrarily giving the award this week.
He ran down Russell Wilson from behind in this game one play. That's impressive. It was really kind of jarring. You don't see Russell Wilson get tackled outside of the pocket because he's so savvy sliding and getting out of bounds. You see him get sacked all the time.
Yeah.
To see him scrambling and get tackled was like a really weird moment. I was like, I don't know if I've ever seen that before. My defensive player of the week for the AFC North nominee is Carlos Dunlap. I think pretty much he's an honorable mention for me to Sam Hubbard's performance. And while his stat line's not as strong, he had 7 tackles, 1 sack, 2 tackles for a loss. His presence, he was every time you turn around, Carlos Dunlap was in the picture. That D-line's no joke, man. To the fact that we're talking about 2 guys before Geno Atkins is testament to that unit.
Yeah. Geno was causing problems himself. You could give it to really anyone, but I feel like Sam Hubbard, he's the newest, he's the young. Let's give him a little something,
young gun.
Give him a little taste
agree.
of that success. Plus,
Yeah.
it's the Bengals. We don't give the Bengals any credit. We don't have a Bengals representative. You know what? Team stinks. You're the bottom of the division. But Sam Hubbard was the top defensive player of this week in the AFC North. And if not him, then one of your other great defensive line.
Right. Yeah, I'll ride that train. I'm down.
Congratulations to Lamar Jackson and Sam Hubbard.
It's one of the accolades I know they've been fighting for pretty strong their entire lives. So we'll see who's able to claim it next week. Can they hold on to it?
We should like mail certificates.
We should, right? They'll be like, "What the fuck?"
To the team facilities and see if
Should be written in like crayon or something, right? Then they'll take us really seriously. Hey man, I'm down.
To send a t-shirt. We'd have to send a t-shirt if we were gonna get serious,
right?
You know, that way they don't just throw it away.
Then they can sue us for using their logo. But anyways, yeah, we can make it like on official letterhead and everything. It'll be good. It'll be good stuff. All right. Well, that's pretty much it for this week in football. Well, at least for the AFC North, that's pretty much it. A lot of crazy stuff happened this week, but don't forget, everybody, it's still week 1 of football. There's still so many unknowns. Good teams... What's a way to say this? Good teams might start off good, but great teams finish good, right? So we'll see how everyone adjusts from their week 1 loss. And when I say everybody, I mean everyone that matters. And how they pick up the pieces and show everybody that there may be something different than what everyone thought they were. Maybe they're not who they thought they were.
Ooh.
Yeah. Take that, Delaney Walker. All right.
He's a listener.
Yeah, I know.
He heard you.
Anyways, let's that's it. So, as always, catch us live Tuesdays and Thursdays. This upcoming Thursday, we're going to do our preview of the games that are upcoming that season. It'll also be at the same exact time as the Thursday night football game. So that's 9:30 Eastern p.m. Check it out on YouTube, Twitch, Facebook. We had some interactions today, and maybe we'll pay more attention and get to them as they come. But I would love to interact with y'all as we do the podcast. It's fun. And also check us out on whatever podcast forum you can get us on. Tell your friends, tell your family, spread the community, join the Pigskin Pick'em. It's all good fun. Interact with us, polls, all that business. Also next week we're going to have a bunch of recurring segments as well. More often than not, our segments are going to be during the preview episode. So come in for that. We'll of course have fill in the blanks like we were doing the entire preseason, and a bunch of other cool pick'em stuff. So there you have it. You guys got anything else?
If Tom Brady and Randall Cunningham had kids together, and Drew Brees and Mike Vick had kids together, and then those kids had kids together, Lamar Jackson. Boom.
That is both inaccurate and gross.
Yeah, I was about to say, a little disturbing. Is that what you dream about, Joey?
Don't worry about that.
All right, you got anything, Chad?
It's going to be okay, Stiller Nation. It's going to be okay.
All right. Well, it's been good, everybody. Take it easy.
See you on Thursday.
See you Thursday.
Later.